This is Flea Market Fantasy number 13. This is your co-host, Mike L. And as always, I'm joined by...
Michael Dell of the LCS Hockey Radio Show.
Yes, and this week is Mike Dell's pick. So, Mike Dell, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, we're going back to Marvel, of course.
Of course.
We're 13 episodes in, and we haven't had an Avengers title, so I'm like, here we go. We're going to go with the Avengers, number 160 from 1977.
Yes, and this is written by Jim Shooter.
Yep.
Drawn by George Perez. And it's actually funny because I've been reading some of these issues around this era on the side, right? Just because I got like a collection of, issues. And so I was really excited to read this one. But I got to say, spoiler, I really thought it was pretty bad. But we can get to that later, okay?
I don't think it's... We'll get into it.
Yeah, okay.
Well, all right, Michael. Let's Avengers 160. Let's look at the cover here first, so people can get an idea of what is happening. Okay. We got. I like it. They're still billed as the Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the Avengers, and 30 cents. So that's nice. And in the box there, underneath the price and the number, you just have the Vision popping out of it,
right?
Like phasing through. So that's pretty cool. And then for the cover, though, it's a spectacular cover by George Perez. In the foreground, we can see the sides of Beast, Black Panther, and Scarlet Witch, and they're looking back towards Grim Reaper, who's front and center, and he's got Wonder Man and Vision tied up and look like some beaded bracelets, and he's got his scythe, his sickle, poised over their heads, and he says, "Your friends are powerless to save you. The verdict has been reached. One of you must die." And it's the trial right there at the bottom. It says the trial, exclamation point.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I think it's a great cover.
It's a pretty good cover. I mean, the cover's by Perez too, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Perez is one of my favorite artists. This is obviously early Perez, so it's not quite as good as his later stuff, but it's still really good.
And the sickle there for the Grim Reaper, it's got the energy coming off it, and with the Kirby crackle.
You got it.
Coming around, so that's always impressive. Now, the Grim Reaper, for those of you who aren't familiar with what he looks like, he dresses like in an all-black outfit with a cape, and he's got a skull and crossbones on his chest, and his right hand is like a sickle, like a scythe.
Right. It's a scythe, right? Isn't it?
Yeah. I just don't like to say scythe, so I like to say sickle.
Okay.
That's what it is. Like the Grim Reaper of yore, who harvests the souls.
Sure, okay.
There you go. But yeah, you can tell right away from the cover, Mike, we're in a different era of the Avengers. I guess the main guys are still hanging around, but this comic specifically just focuses on Black Panther, Scarlet Witch, Vision, Wonder Man, and Beast.
Right. So this was a weird time when the Beast from the X-Men was in the Avengers, which obviously a lot of people grew up with that, so they're used to it. But I personally always felt he should have just stayed, with the X-Men. Yeah,
he's a blue furry Beast here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I don't know, Michael. I like the blue furry Beast. And
I do like the blue furry Beast, but what do you think about the fact that he has the exact same haircut as Wolverine?
Well,
ever bother you?
He saw something he liked, and he says, "All right, I want to take that."
Must be it.
Now, I didn't even look up the Beast's history for this because I forgot to.
Okay.
But so when he left the X-Men after the new X-Men came in, how long was it before he joined the Avengers then? Like, what led him to the Avengers? Do you know?
I'm not exactly sure, but from my sketchy memory, X-Men was canceled in 1970. And I think within a couple years, he got the blue fur around 72, 73. And I don't know when he joined the Avengers, but it must have been soon after that.
Like, where was he appearing that he got the blue fur? Like, I really should have done this research.
No problem. He was appearing in a series called Amazing Adventures.
Oh, okay.
And it was so weird because you know how nowadays Marvel will relaunch a series in the middle of a story just to give it a new number one?
Yes.
Well, back in those days, they would start a weird new series called whatever. It could be called Marvel Premiere, and they'd give 3 issues to one character, then 4 issues to another, then 1 issue to another. And so whenever you go back and collect these comics, you have to dig through all these weird series to find them. But yeah, Amazing Adventures was just one of those random anthologies. And the Beast appeared in 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm looking at them right now. 16, and then he joined the Avengers sometime after that. I'm not sure when.
And again, they do those anthologies to test out new characters, new creators. Right. And I believe that's how I recall reading a couple of weeks ago. We mentioned that Iron Fist, Chris Claremont and John Byrne were working on an Iron Fist story in one of those anthologies, and it got popular, so they gave him his own book. So that's what they did. They tested stuff out. And I'm sure they thought, oh, well, Beast is working here. Let's put him in the Avengers.
Sure, yeah.
That's how it happened. So,
yeah, because they basically didn't create a new character, but he was so different that it was like a new character, right? With
yes.
the fur. And the other thing I should point out, when he first appeared in Amazing Adventures, his fur was gray.
Really?
It wasn't blue. Yeah. So I'm not sure when they changed it, but...
Is that kind of like a Hulk thing, or... Remember they
I think so, yeah.
First printed him as gray by mistake or whatever?
No, it was because they wanted him to be gray, but the printing at the time was too primitive, and so gray just didn't show up. And it's probably the same thing that happened with the Beast. So
yeah, all right. Well, there you go. There's some Beast history for you.
Yeah.
All right, Michael. So this book opens up the big splash page. It's a great splash page, great introduction to the story, because we see the Avengers from behind. You got Wonder Man, Scarlet Witch, Beast, Black Panther, and Vision. They're out looking over the city. And they're waving goodbye to their buddies Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, the Wizard.
Yes.
Well, I was going to say Ant-Man, but it's actually Yellow Jacket at this point.
Right.
And Wasp. They're flying away. They're leaving. Because the Avengers just defeated Galvatron in the previous issue.
Was that his name? Did they say that?
Yes.
Where do they say that?
Or is it Gravitron? Gravitron.
Yes, I knew it couldn't be Galvatron, because then I would have... That's a Transformers character.
Yes. Gravitron. Mm-hmm. So they defeated him in the previous issue. So now they're disbanding. They're going their separate ways. They all got stuff to do. I don't know. Who knows? Well, they got to take the Wizard. Iron Man's got to take the Wizard. For those who don't remember the Wizard, he's kind of like Marvel's Flash.
Exactly. And he's from the 1940s. So he's... And it's funny because in Marvel, they have real time, kind of. So he's actually an old man at this point.
Yeah, and he has a heart condition.
Right.
And Iron Man's taking him back to the hospital so he can get checked out. And Yellow Jacket and Wasp. Yellow Jacket says, hey, I got to make some improvements to the suit. Back to the lab.
Yeah.
That's where they're going. And then Thor and Captain America. I don't know what's going on there. But Thor's just carrying Captain America under his arm as he's flying with his hammer.
You'd think they'd have used the Quinjet, but this is back when they just carried people. It just looks ridiculous for Iron Man to be carrying the Wizard like that, eh?
I think it's more ridiculous for Thor to be carrying Captain America the way he is.
And you're right. It is a little bit embarrassing, but
but anyway, back to this splash page. So we see the Avengers looking, waving goodbye to their chums. But then in the extreme foreground, Micah, we just see the sickle of the Grim Reaper.
Yes,
it's really good. So you know he's there. He's looking at him. He's spying on him. And you see the big title, The Trial. And then the next page here, we get the Avengers is shooting the breeze, talking stuff off. And here's an interesting thing, Michael, from a craft perspective of writing. Mm-hmm. Again, my background's in literature and fiction writing and novels and whatnot. So it's a little different than the comic books because in novels, you want to stick to one point of view per section. You can switch, but at least in one, you want to keep one point of view. And when you jump around to different internal thoughts from people, they call it head hopping.
I never heard that before. Okay.
Yeah, and the problem there is the reason you don't want to do it because in a book, in a novel, if you're hopping heads, jumping around, it can confuse readers. It can be jarring. They can be pulled out of characters. Now in comic books, it's a little easier to get away with because it's a visual medium, so you can clearly see who is thinking.
Yes.
It's different. But the other big reason you don't do it in fiction, and this is really the main reason, is because it creates too much emotional distance between the reader and the characters. Because if you're jumping around, you can't really get involved into one character to feel that, because you want to experience the emotions. You don't want to be watching. You don't want to be reading. You want to be experiencing. So in fiction, you avoid the head hopping. But here in 1977 Marvel Comics, they head hop like champions.
Yes.
In the first 2 pages here, we get into the internal thoughts of Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Black Panther, even a little bit. While we don't get thought bubbles from the Beast, the narration tells you what's going on in the Beast's head. So yeah, that's just in the first 2 pages. We're hopping.
This is fascinating because I obviously love reading, but I've never studied literature, but I've definitely studied film. And, this is also something, there's certain films, like say a movie like Taxi Driver, there's an effort made to keep every scene from the point of view of Travis Bickle.
Yes.
And there's only, I think, one exception in the whole movie, and it really sticks out. But if you're not looking for it, you don't notice it. But ideally, you do the same thing in a movie, but in a slightly different way. But I guess the question is it possible that comics can handle, what did you call it, head hopping?
Yes.
Can they handle it? Is it ideal? Or should they stick to the same rules that literature does? And what I'd like to do is for all of our listeners, both of you, to just write in and let us know what you think of, the different styles that you can use. But anyway.
And it's really tricky in a book like the Avengers because you have so many characters. You're dealing with here at least 5 characters that you would want the readers to feel close to. So how do you do that? You get in their heads. But I'm thinking back, Michael, when you were reading those early Spider-Man issues from Amazing Spider-Man, did we ever get inside the head of other characters than Peter Parker? I can't really recall.
I mean, I'm definitely positive we saw thought balloons from...
Like Aunt May? Or?
Yeah, maybe. But I remember specifically seeing one from J. Jonah Jameson, which was really unusual.
Oh, that is weird.
It might have been more speech bubbles, but he was definitely on his own because it was a really weird scene where he admitted why he didn't like Spider-Man. Yeah. But other than that, maybe you're right. I don't know.
Yeah. So, but that's why it's all about emotional distance with the characters. But again, here it can work in comic books. I don't know. Because, Michael, I am trying to work on my own comic book. Remember a couple weeks ago we said I want to start working on my comic book again?
I believe it was a couple years ago that you first mentioned it. But yes. No, yeah.
But a couple weeks ago on the show, I said I'm going to start working. And I am still chipping away. I actually have started working on it again. But when I'm basically following literary rules more than the old 1977 comic book stuff.
Sure.
So it's interesting. And I'm also dealing with a team of people. So but I'm sticking mostly with 2 point of views. So it'll be... It's interesting to see the difference between the ways that things are structured. But anyway, back here, we're head hopping.
Yes.
And so the first 2 pages here, we're just getting everyone's perspective on things. Black Panther's a little uneasy about Wonder Man. He says, I don't know. So I just feel something's not right about Wonder Man. Something strange. And then Beast is kind of thinking back to his X-Men days and how he feels a little insecure. He doesn't really feel like he's fitting in with the Avengers as well as he should. What else do you have going on here? On a Vision and Scarlet Witch. Again, they're married. The Vision. And Scarlet Witch. He's a robot.
Yes.
But she's married to him. She's a freaky girl, that Scarlet Witch. And then we get Beast. He says, well, I'm just going to go clean up the lab from the fight. At least I can be a jovial janitor, he says. So he goes jumping into the lab. And then, Micah, we hear a big old blam. And there's a great panel at the bottom of the page of Beast gets blasted through a wall, and Black Panther pulls Scarlet Witch out of the way. Wonder Man jumps out of the way, and Vision just stands there and phases.
I love it. That was so smart. Right, yep.
And just the perspective on this and everything, it's a great panel. But here's the thing, Michael. It is smart for the Vision to just phase out of the way, but he doesn't seem real concerned about his wife.
I was thinking that. It's like he could have phased everybody, at least his wife. You're right.
Black Panther... he saves Scarlet Witch. But can Vision phase other people, or is that only something he can? I think that's only something he can do.
Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe
it's not like Shadowcat, Kitty Pryde, who can phase others. I'm pretty sure Vision can only phase. But you think he would at least shove his wife out of the way or something? Sure,
right.
Nope. He just stands there.
Yep.
Wonder Man catches Beast. So, it's okay. He's safe. Yeah. So Black Panther, Vision, and Scarlet Witch run in, and they turn on the lights, and there's the Grim Reaper.
Yes.
And this is another good panel, Michael, the introduction of the Grim Reaper standing there. Now, we're about to get really deep into Wonder Man, Grim Reaper, and the Vision. Now, how do you feel about this stuff, Michael? Are you familiar with their backstories and how this all ties together?
I am vaguely familiar with it, but it's funny because I read the Vision miniseries from a few years ago by Tom King. Did you read that?
Yes, Grim Reaper is murdered in that by Virginia.
Right.
His wife, Vision's wife, his robot wife.
And it's funny because I've read, Avengers on and off here and there my whole life, but I kind of forgot that Grim Reaper was Wonder Man's brother. And so I completely forgot about that connection to Vision,
Yeah.
Because, for obviously there's no way to talk about the story without explaining the backstory. Should we just explain that now?
Yeah, I'll get into that. But one other point I want to make about that more recent Vision. I just made fun of Scarlet Witch for being a freak being a crazy lady for wanting to marry a robot. But Mike L, when I was reading that Vision miniseries, I got to say, I swooned for Virginia.
Oh, really?
I thought I was smitten.
You were smitten with Virginia. Okay.
Yeah, a fictional robot. So I'm even freakier than Scarlet Witch.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
I would
funny.
marry Virginia Vision in a heartbeat.
Really?
No doubt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I felt bad about having a crush on, like, Gem when I was a kid, but okay.
Yeah, I'm a 44-year-old man who would marry Virginia. And yeah, she murdered Grim Reaper and she buried him in the backyard.
Right.
That was so great.
She shouldn't have put that on her OkCupid profile, I think.
I'd still write her.
Yeah.
Because I think if I recall correctly, doesn't she just kill him with like a cookie tray or something? She just beats the hell out of him with like a
Something like that. Yeah, I can't remember, but it's pretty ugly. It's pretty bloody.
It's great. All right. Anyway, let's get into Wonder Man here. His real name is Simon Williams.
Yes.
And, Eric Williams is his older brother, the Grim Reaper. That's Eric Williams.
Yeah.
That's his older brother. And their father was a fellow named Sanford Williams, not to be confused with Fred Sanford.
Okay.
Son.
Okay.
And he was a wealthy industrialist and founder of Williams Innovations, a chief competitor and rival to Stark Enterprises. Look out.
Okay.
So Eric Williams, Simon's older brother, he didn't like his dad. And he says, hey, I want nothing to do with your business. So he went off on his own. And unbeknownst to the rest of the family, he got tied in with the Maggia crime family. And he became a criminal. But Simon, the younger brother, he stuck with his dad. And he worked in the company. And then his dad passed away. He died, I think, of a heart attack. And Simon was just 22 years old. He inherited the entire company. So he's now running Williams Innovations, but at 22, not ready for the job. The business starts to fail. It's about to go under, and he asked his brother Eric for help. He's like, "Hey Eric, I need some help here, buddy." So Eric, being the good, thoughtful brother he is, he tells Simon, "Well, what you got to do is you need to embezzle money. You embezzle money from the company." Then invest it in these criminal schemes that the Maggia are running. You'll make your money back. You'll save the company. Everything will be happy. And Simon, the impressionable youth, agrees. So he embezzles the money. He gets caught, and he gets arrested, and he's facing a jail term, Michael. And do you know what happens then?
No, I don't. What happens?
The Enchantress.
Oh.
She comes in because at the time she's working with a fellow named Baron Zemo.
Okay. Okay.
And also the Executioner, another Asgardian fella.
Right.
And the three of them are they call themselves the Masters of Evil.
Right.
And this is actually the second incarnation of the Masters of Evil. The first one was Zemo and I think Radioactive Man and the Black Knight, actually.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, the original Black Knight. And someone else, I don't know, whatever. But so here we got the Enchantress, the Executioner, and Baron Zemo, and and the Enchantress goes in, and you know her, she enchants men and she manipulates them. So she gets them to free Simon Williams. They get him out of prison because Zemo read in the newspapers that Simon Williams blamed Tony Stark and Stark Enterprises for their company's failing. So he's like, oh, here we go. This guy's got a vendetta against Stark. And at this time, Zemo, they didn't know Tony Stark was Iron Man, but they knew Iron Man worked for Stark.
Right, the bodyguard.
And they hated Iron Man. So like, oh, we can use Simon Williams as a pawn to get Iron Man. So they take him out of prison. They take him down to Zemo's like South American lab. And Zemo's got this special procedure he wants to do with ionic energy and an ionic ray. And he says, if you submit to this experiment here, Simon Williams, we will give you super power, super strength, super durability. And then we want you to go beat up Iron Man and the Avengers. So he goes, all right, yeah, let's do this. So they go through this big, extensive procedure with ion energy and radiation, all kind of stuff. And it works. It works. But there's a catch, Michael.
Okay.
The procedure stimulated his metabolism to such an extreme level that unless Zemo gives him an antidote every day or so, Wonder Man will die.
Oh, okay.
So he'll live like maybe a week tops.
Really?
So Wonder Man is kind of being blackmailed into doing it too. Like he has to go beat up the Avengers to fight the Avengers, or Zemo will just let him die. So Wonder Man goes and gets the Avengers, and he befriends the Avengers by telling them, "I'm dying. I need your help." So they put him through all these scientific tests to try and heal him. They can't do anything. But Wonder Man, he lures the Avengers into a trap, into an ambush, Michael.
Okay.
And the Masters of Evil jump, and they have a big fight. But during the fight, when it looks bleak for the Avengers, Wonder Man, he turns face, to use a wrestling term.
Sure, I understand the term. Yeah.
Yeah, he has a conscious self. He's like, oh, I need to save the Avengers. I'm a good guy. I'm not a bad guy. So he fights back. He saves the Avengers. But after the fight, Michael, because Zemo didn't give him the antidote, he dies. Or does he?
Okay. And this is all, I believe, in one issue of Avengers, isn't it?
Maybe over 2 issues, but yeah,
Okay.
it's quickly compacted story, even though there's a lot going on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like a 10-issue arc or anything. It's very brief. So the body of the Avengers take the body of Simon Williams. They think he's dead. They have put him in a coffin and they take him back, I think, to the mansion. But when this is going on, then Ultron comes into play, Michael. And like Ultron creates the Vision, correct?
Yes.
But he needs, to create the Vision, he takes the body, the synthezoid body of the original Human Torch.
Yes.
That we mentioned on the show a few weeks back when we were talking about the Fantastic Four.
Mm-hmm.
You actually remember the creator's name.
Yes. And of course, now I can't. It's something Horton. What is it?
His last name's Horton, but I can't remember his first name either.
Right.
But it's all right. So, so the Ultron took the body of the original Human Torch, but he needed a brain for it. So he took the brain waves of Wonder Man. And by the way, Zemo called him Wonder Man. That's how he got the Wonder Man name. He took the brain waves of Wonder Man and imprinted them on the robot brain in the Vision. So the Vision is the body of the Human Torch, but the mind of Wonder Man.
Right.
All right.
Very convoluted.
Yes, it gets very confusing.
Yes.
And of course, I'm sorry, but the Vision, not unlike Wonder Man, he also raised up against his creator and was originally kind of evil, but then he joined the Avengers. So he's a good guy.
Good point.
As Wonder Man did.
And for those that are listening that don't know, the Human Torch, we're not talking about the one in the Fantastic Four. We're talking about the original 1940s Android version that was... He had disappeared in the 50s, and so by this point, he wasn't being published. I believe Roy Thomas originally wanted to bring back the 1940s Vision, which is yet another character.
Oh, I didn't even know that. There's a 40s Vision?
Yes, there is. Yep. And Stan Lee, for some reason, was like, no, I don't want you to bring back the Vision. And so then he's like, well, what about the Human Torch? He's like, yeah, go ahead. And so he's like, well, what's the difference? So basically, if Stan Lee would have just let him use the Vision, the new Vision would have been probably just a new version of the old Vision, but instead he made the Vision an android, like a revived android of the Human Torch. It's just really convoluted.
Well, Michael, if he would have let Roy Thomas use the original, well, I'm so confused too.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Okay.
I was going to say, wouldn't the Vision be in the Fantastic Four then? I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know. I don't know what he would be. Yeah.
All right. So anyway, we're just getting started here with Wonder Man's convoluted backstory. All right. So
yeah.
So after the Vision stuff happened, the Grim Reaper wants his brother back.
Right.
He feels guilty because he gave him the advice to embezzle the money and got him arrested, and it started all this. So he feels guilty. He wants to save his brother. And even though he thinks his brother is dead physically, he knows that the Vision has his brain waves. So he tries to convince the Vision. How does this go? He wants to he thought about putting the Vision's brain back, the brain waves back in Wonder Man's body, but he's like, nah, he's dead. We can't do that. We need a living human body. So his plan was, let's take your brain, Vision, and put it in Captain America's body. You see?
Yes.
And he was going to do this with the help of a fella named the Space Phantom.
Right.
Space Phantom. Now, the Vision agrees to go along with this plan.
Uh-huh.
And that comes up later in the story. We'll get to that in a later because it comes up in the story because it's very entertaining.
Flashback. Ridiculous. Yeah.
All right. So that after that, all that stuff happens. Let's just say it doesn't happen. Of course, Vision doesn't take Captain America's body. So the Grim Reaper gets defeated, but he stole Wonder Man's body. And he goes to a fellow named Black Talon, a voodoo priest down in Louisiana. And he says, hey, can you reanimate this body for me using your voodoo magic? And Black Talon does just that. He reanimates Wonder Man's body, but Wonder Man no longer has his brainwaves, or at least he's not, the same because they're in the vision. So he's kind of like just a zombie. He's just an automaton, just a roaming around a zombie. So here's the big plan that Grim Reaper has. We're going to make him into a zombie. I'm going to pack him up into a wooden crate, and I'm going to ship him to the Avengers. And that's exactly what he does. So when the Avengers get the big wooden crate, Wonder Man busts out, and now he's a zombie set to destroy the Avengers.
Okay. Is this referred to, or is this all from your research? Because I'm desperately trying to find this.
They do mention it in the book.
Okay.
Through, but
okay.
I did do extensive research.
Okay. Gotcha. I was like, Jesus.
So the Avengers, they subdue the zombie Wonder Man, and they send him back on his way, but they follow him. They want to see where he comes from, so they follow him back and to the Reaper and Black Talon, and I think the Living Laser was there as well.
Okay, I hope so.
Yeah, I think he had the Serpent Society crown, if I remember correctly. But during the battle scene there, his interactions with the Living Laser somehow brings Wonder Man back to consciousness, like the energy or whatever.
Sure.
And he reverts to his normal self. Like he's back to being the Simon Williams of Wonder Man in the old days. But there's one catch, Michael.
Okay.
He's no longer a human. His body, the reason it was in that death-like state, it was a coma. His body was transforming from human flesh and blood into living ionic energy.
Yes, that's right. Okay, I remember that part.
So there you go. That's Wonder Man. And he joined the Avengers then, but he was always insecure because he didn't feel like he was really a hero.
Okay.
He always felt bad that he was an embezzler and he didn't deserve to be called a hero to be with the Avengers. So sometimes, Michael, in battle, he wouldn't come through for him. He was scared because he was scared of dying again because he had been dead for so long. So he's like, if I go into battle and I die again, I don't want to go back to being in that oblivion. I don't want to die. So he was very scared. He was scared, Michael.
Okay.
And it took him a while to overcome that. And then his story gets very convoluted because when you,
Did you say then it gets convoluted?
Yes.
Okay.
Because later on, because he still it's like he's kind of in love with Scarlet Witch because I don't know his bond with the Vision. And then the Vision gets his memory wiped out by some. I don't know. Did he get disassembled and reassembled without his memories?
Yeah, that was later on in West Coast Avengers when he became white, right?
I don't even remember. Probably. But yeah, so then at that point, Scarlet Witch says, hey, Wonder Man, can we have your brain waves again and put them back in Vision's brain to make him like he used to be so I can still bang this robot like I used to? And Wonder Man said, nope, not going to do it.
Right.
Yep. And then later on, I guess Wonder Man got killed again, but by like a Kree ionic cannon or something hit him and it dispersed his body. But Scarlet Witch, she still had feelings for Wonder Man because that was actually her husband's brain in a way.
Right.
So she brought him back to life using her chaos magic and she reassembled his energy into his. It's very strange.
It's very.
It's very strange.
Yes. See, to adapt this directly to like a movie or TV show would be near impossible, wouldn't it?
It would take like six seasons of a weekly series.
Exactly.
All right. So anyway, that's the basic history of Wonder Man and Vision. If you can make sense of all that. So that brings us back to this issue, and the Grim Reaper appears, and he's fighting the Avengers. And he makes pretty easy work of the Avengers, Michael.
Yeah, it's surprising, eh?
Because he's got his sickle there. And by the way, he got his sickle from the Tinkerer. Okay.
That's
a game to him.
Who I've come across last week in Here Comes the Spider Cast. But anyway, yeah.
So in this next bit of the book here, that they're recounting their past histories with the Grim Reaper, and they're going over the old times, and he's talking about his experiences with the Vision and all that. And the Beast wakes up from before, when he got knocked over, knocked out by the Grim Reaper. So he comes running in, and he's out for revenge. And he jumps up at the Grim Reaper and bang, or I should say kang.
Yeah, you should say yes.
And the Grim Reaper says, "Don't, you are worth only the flat of my blade."
I love it.
And you put that line in there to explain why he didn't cut his head off. Right. You are only worth the flat of my blade.
Yep.
So once again, Beast goes flying through the air, but this time Black Panther catches him with his legs.
Right.
It's like it's the circus.
Yeah.
So we're like 6 pages into this book, or 10 pages, I guess, and Beast has already been knocked unconscious and caught by 2 teammates.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Useful teammate, yeah.
So Scarlet Witch goes to throw a hex bolt at Grim Reaper. And now, Michael, do you see this? Would you like to read what Grim Reaper says here?
You mean, I think not. My scythe serves as a rotor which can lift me to safety. You mean that?
Yes.
Or
yes.
carry me to the attack. Wanda. Yeah, this is ridiculous. Yeah.
It's tremendous. All right. So Vision's very mad. I also like that every time Vision talks, his word balloons are in yellow.
Yeah, it's to show how robotic he is. I also love his next line when Wanda gets shot. He's like, it's what's her name? Grim Reaper, that says that she is not dead, merely in a death-like coma from which only I can awaken her.
Yes.
Ridiculous.
Like, how is that possible? How could you even do that? Yeah, because he shot him all with like a laser beam out of his scythe. And, that's scythe. It's like the Swiss Army knife of.
I know. I was just gonna say exactly. Yeah.
It can do everything.
Scythes. Yeah.
So then he says, "Idiot! I have prepared to deal with you. You think you are invulnerable, but I've learned every detail of your synthezoid construction, and I can hurt you." And this is a great panel, though, because you see the Vision grabbing his head in agony.
Yes.
And then George Perez put like an overlay of a outlined big picture of Vision's head screaming.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a really good panel. And then he shoots a Wonder Man with his laser beam out of his sickle. And he says, "Perhaps you really are my brother alive again, but until I am certain, I must treat you as a possible threat. I am sorry." And he knocks him out. How about that? What drama, Michael? What drama?
I know. Drama. Is that how you say it? In
That's how I say it.
Okay.
It's kind of like my robot.
Okay.
All right. So all the Avengers are knocked out, and they're brought back to life. And here's another good sequence of panels. You get a shot of each of the Avengers: Beast, Wonder Man, Black Panther, Vision, Scarlet Witch. And as they're waking up, you get to see some Kirby crackle go over their heads as they're waking up. And then we see, Michael, they're all sitting at a table, and they're wearing like these bracelets. And Grim Reaper says, "Court is now in session."
Mm-hmm.
I like that the back of their chairs all have like little symbols for them.
Very cool. Very Justice League-esque, in my opinion.
Yes.
I love
Black
it.
Panther has a little cat face on the back of his chair, and there's a diamond for the Vision and a big W for Scarlet Witch.
Right.
All right, Michael. So what's the premise here? Why does Grim Reaper knock him out, and then he wakes him up, and they're sitting at a table with bracelets on? What's going on here?
So this is the tricky part. If you thought the rest of it was convoluted, he is going to basically put them on trial to prove which one out of the Vision and Wonder Man is his real brother. Yes. Right? And so...
And here's the catch. Only one can survive. One.
Right.
Whoever is not my brother, I'm killing.
Yeah.
So get ready.
So then they proceed to, each state their case, but also we see flashbacks of all these old stories along with references to what issues they appear in.
Well, we're skipping something big here, though, Michael. The bracelets.
The bracelets.
Then we get some more exposition here. Can you explain?
Okay, so contempt of court will be severely punished. The energy induction bands on your wrists are individually attuned to your molecular structures. They can cause excruciating pain. And then it says the Black Panther will serve as counsel to the accused. 2 men cannot share my brother's identity. One of them must die. Yeah. That's it. So they're specially attuned. Yeah,
they're specially attuned to their molecular structures or whatever. And there's a line in here somewhere. I don't remember what page, but he says, you will tremble if you knew how I got this information.
Yeah.
So now I'm interested to find out, Michael, does that ever get paid off? I'm guessing it doesn't.
I
But
don't
like,
think
do you ever find out how Grim Reaper got that information?
No, I doubt it. I seriously.
Yeah. Because who would it possibly be? Like, do you think this is a Doctor Doom situation? Like he's dealing with Doctor Doom? He somehow had it? Or
I doubt it. It's probably, Executioner or one of those or Enchantress or somebody, right?
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so he has all their molecular details, and you will tremble if you knew how I got it. Maybe he just I don't know, was hiding behind a door listening to him someday. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't know how I got it. All right, so yeah, then we get all the flashbacks. The Vision takes the stand first, and he tells his story about the Human Torch and all the brainwave stuff we covered, and the Space Phantom trying to put his brain into Captain America, and Grim Reaper says, "See, you wanted to take over Captain America's body. My brother would never do such a thing. You're a bad dude. You're a bad dude, Vision." But when the truth comes out, Mike, when Black Panther gets to cross-examine the witness, what do they find out?
Okay, so, and I love this. So the Vision admits that he was going to take Captain America's body, but then they show a wide shot of this scene happening, and he says, I did so. Oh, so sorry. So Black Panther says, "Vision, please tell the court the reason you apparently agreed to help steal Captain America's body." And Vision says, "I did so because I saw Captain America himself hiding in the shadows, signaling me to play along until he could spring our trap." And you see a shot of Captain America signaling to him with his hands. It is awesome. I love it.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Real quick, Mike, I forgot when we were talking earlier about Wanda and the Vision there, and we were talking about some of the lines he had. There's a great line on page 7, the top right panel, where Vision's saying how Wonder Man is unaware of our previous encounters, Reaper. He has been told, however, that I am an artificial being that was programmed with his brain patterns while he was seemingly dead.
Yes.
And then Scarlet Witch says, "Artificial? Darling, no, you're not a machine." And he says, "Silence, Wanda."
Yes, I know. And we must remember that Jim Shooter wrote this, and he tends to write his relationships between men and women like that. I think Jim Shooter's the one that wrote the story where Hank Pym slaps Wasp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was him.
Some would also argue that is also how Jim Shooter had relationships with men and women throughout his life.
Oh, really? Okay.
He seems to be very combative by nature.
Yes.
I don't know. So next up on the stand after that, I think, is Wonder Man, right? He comes up and they're talking about
yes.
And he gives his whole backstory, and he's sitting in a chair recounting his history, and we get to see everything that we already talked about. But yeah, there is a panel of him busting out of the wooden crate, Michael. Do you see that?
Right, yes. See that now.
Nucleo and the living laser are also involved. So maybe that energy of the Nucleo guy in the living laser. But so Grim Reaper is he's trying to figure out, who's his real brother. And I wanted to believe it's Simon. It is still hard to accept, yet your voice, your manner, you are the same as before. You're my brother. So that would mean he's going to kill the Vision. But then Wonder Man, Michael, he speaks up, and what does he do?
Well, you talk about the scene where he reveals a secret.
Yep.
He says, okay, so then Grim Reaper says is the Black Panther says he is not Simon Williams, nor is he the same as any man who ever lived. You know? All right, it's true. I admit it. Look at my eyes. And basically he has Kirby crackle in his eyes. Yeah, because he's made of energy.
Yeah, he takes off his little goggles, because this is the Wonder Man's original costume. It's like he's got a green skull mask on. It kind of covers this.
Yeah,
kind of
one of the ugliest costumes in human history, I should point out. But yes.
And he had red goggles, so he took the goggles off. But what's going on in the midsection of his costume, Michael? It's all green and red, and then he's got this spirally design on his abs.
It looks like something either you'd wear to a hoedown, or it's like a design from a gun or something. I don't know what it is. But
I'll be honest though, Michael, what's worse, this costume or the later one he gets that's just all blue with a big red W on his torso?
That's pretty bad. What about the one in the 80s where he just wore a winter coat, winter coat? Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, he wore like a red coat with a belt around.
Yeah. He's had so many costumes, but they're all ugly. Each one is uglier than the next, you know?
That's a good topic of discussion, Michael. This will take some thought, but what hero or characters had the worst costumes ever? Because the Wonder Man would have to be right there.
Yeah, you'd be right up there. And you know what? We should save that for if I'm ever invited back to LCS hockey, we'll do that.
Yeah, that does sound like a topic for the LCS show.
All
That's
right.
just the kind of nonsense we like to delve into
Yes.
extremely deeply. All right, so the trial's going on, but he says, "Hey, I'm gonna, you're my brother still, my God, Simon. You're still my brother." I don't know, but so he wants to kill the Vision. He's like, because the Vision says, "Hey, you know what? I am not your brother. I'm a unique individual.
Mm-hmm. I'm a Vision.
I'm a man owned by myself. And what difference if I have the same brainwaves? I am unique. I am the Vision. And thus I am content. Go ahead and kill me." And Scarlet Witch is crying in the background. She says, "Oh, my darling, yes. And I love you."
Jim Shooter, folks. There you go. He's an expert in abusive relationships.
So we get to see Grim Reaper. He took his mask off, so he's staring his brother in the eye. But he says, "All right, I am not on trial here. I will not be replaced." And he hits the button on his scythe for the bands. So he gives all the Avengers a serious shock. And they all fall down pretty much dead. Oh, yeah, here's the line. "You would tremble if you knew who provided me with the technology to build them Avengers." The bracelets he's talking about.
Okay, yeah. So I thought it was the information. But yeah, it's just the bracelet then. That makes more sense, right?
All right. Maybe it's the Tinkerer, since he got his sickle from the Tinkerer. Maybe it's the Tinkerer. But would you really tremble with a guy named the Tinkerer? Probably not.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. Anyway, so he knocks them all unconscious, and he says, "All right, well, I gotta kill that. Oh, I need to execute the superfluous android." But Wonder Man, Michael, he steps up and says, he just says, "Your bracelets don't work on me because I'm a different guy. My molecular structure is not what it used to be." And he just punches the Grim Reaper. Bang. Right. Cracks him. So we finally get a punch. So they start squaring off. And this is a pretty good fight scene. I like this little fight scene.
Yeah, it is. It's well done. Some nice George Perez action with some Kirby crackle throughout. And I also love the way George Perez draws machinery. You notice all that machinery that's getting smashed. I love that. He's great at that. Debris. He's really good at debris.
Really good at debris. Yeah. Grim Reaper shoots his laser beam at Wonder Man, and Wonder Man just pulls up a piece of the floor to block it. And then very cool. And then he cracks what looks like a support column. He just punches it right at Grim Reaper. Yeah. I don't know how that'll affect.
Wasn't supporting nothing important.
Yeah, apparently not. But so a big chunk of it goes to the Grim Reaper, but he just cuts it up with his sickle. It starts spinning and like a rotary blade, and just cuts it up. And then he launches a big energy bolt at Wonder Man, catches him in the chest, and it burns his costume. So we see his costume's all in shreds, but it doesn't hurt him. And he says, "You're powerless against me, Eric. I'm Wonder Man, damn it." Well, he doesn't actually say that. That would be better dialogue. All right, so he walks towards the Grim Reaper, and this is pretty cool, Michael. The Grim Reaper just shoves the spinning sickle right into his brother's chest, and it breaks.
Mm-hmm. And then we get a really cool silent panel of his reaction. I love it.
I love that panel as well. He's just staring at his broken sickle. It just, it's just a nub. And he says, and then Wonder Man says, "It's over, Eric." "Simon, no." "Ah!" And he cracks him with the right hand and knocks him unconscious. And then he frees the Avengers from their bracelets. Mm-hmm. And the Avengers are all just chatting it up. And Beast says, "Is there anything I can do for you, buddy?" And he's like, "Yeah, you can just leave me alone for a while." "Okay." And then the book ends with Wonder Man staring above from down at his defeated brother. And the broken sickle.
Yep. Silent panel again.
Yeah, and how about that panel? Perez did this a couple times. We just see a side profile of Wonder Man in the next to last panel. And the background is just like this intricate thatch work.
Yes. I don't know if he kind of invented that, but he's definitely used it before, and I've seen other artists use it before. It's a really bizarre choice, but it's cool. Yeah,
because it's not like there's anything that looks like that in the background of where they're at.
It's
right. Just a design to fill up the background. And he did it a couple other places throughout Not to that degree, though, I don't think, like the whole panel background. But so there you go. And then next issue, Beware the Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Ant-Man's coming back. So there you go, Michael. The trial.
Yes. I'll just say this. Of course, I enjoyed it because I like Jim Shooter's writing. I love the art, which we'll talk about. But I think the reason I didn't like this issue overall is just the premise is so preposterous. You know, like the fact that the Grim Reaper could defeat all of the Avengers single-handedly and tie them up with these bracelets. Like, I mean, his motivation is ridiculous to begin with, but the fact that he could get them to that point means he could have killed them all if he wanted to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but he wanted to have a trial.
I know. It's kind of like Batman. It's like,
yes.
If you want to make Batman look tough, you don't have him get captured and tied up by someone. Like, it's just, don't even write him to get to that point. That's how I see it. I mean, if they would have agreed to it, maybe it would have been better. But sorry, what were we going to say?
Well, and he didn't even just beat the Avengers, Michael. He beat them in like 3 panels.
Exactly.
It was pretty quick. It wasn't. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Maybe we'll get into that later when we give our overall reviews and the writing. But yeah, it's like Shooter wanted to get to a mock trial,
right?
So he had to do whatever he had to do to get there.
Exactly.
So he had to invent the bracelets, but he couldn't explain how they work or who created them
because he didn't want us to tremble, right? Yeah.
He had to do something to Scarlet Witch that would put her in a coma that only he could bring her out of.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so let's talk about some of the creators here. Now, let's start with the art, because we've already talked about George Perez about 3 or 4 issues ago when we did the Fantastic Four story with the big monkey. He was the artist there.
Right.
So we gave his background and all that stuff then. We don't really need to rehash all that.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, go back and listen. Would it kill you? Would it bust your ass to go back through the archives and listen to the Fantastic Four episode with the big monkey? It's a good time. But George Perez, he was 23 here, so he's still maturing as an artist. But he was drawing the Fantastic Four at the same time he was doing the Avengers.
Really?
Which it's pretty crazy to be doing those 2 marquee titles as a young artist.
Well, and also there's absolutely no corners cut. Like, the level of detail is incredible, right?
I will say, yeah, this isn't prime George Perez yet, but it's very well done. He puts in a lot of work. He can, like, last week we did the one with Howard Chaykin on Star Wars. He did not put in a lot of work.
No, he didn't. Clearly, no, he didn't. You're right.
Here we see George Perez really doing a lot of good stuff. I still think you can tell he's young because a lot of his panels are still pretty static, like headshots from the same angle,
right?
Same perspective. And sometimes, particularly Wonder Man, the figures would look a little flat and stiff. But at the same time, he also had some really dynamic panels and some great action scenes. So, yeah, the art here is good. You know? It's not like what Perez would be doing later on in his career, but it's still really good.
Yes, I agree.
He started on Avengers with issue 141, and he did sporadic issues up until 202. 26 issues total plus 2 annuals.
Wow, okay.
So that was his Avengers run. Anything else you'd like to say about the George Perez?
Well, I think the key with him is that it's kind of like we talked about John Byrne before. I don't think John Byrne overall is a great artist, but at this time John Byrne was good. Like in the late 70s and early 80s, he was good. And I think they're both similar in that I don't think that either one of them would really work in any other field. Like, they wouldn't be good fine artists or good illustrators or good design, like Howard Chaykin would work in like commercial art or design work, but
we talked about Bill Sienkiewicz before. Like, he was a classic like illustrator, like or art, like for that kind of art. He could do all kinds of art, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
These guys, like George Perez, is a great comic book artist, and like, again, maybe his anatomy is not perfect and stuff like that, but when you look at some of these panels, even on like page 2. This shot of Yellow Jacket and Wasp flying through the air, and these birds are flying sort of in the opposite direction. Like, that is such a great panel, you know?
Yeah, it's a really good panel there for the context of their size. You know, you can show how small they are by putting the birds in there, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just like he understands exactly how to use a comic page. And like you mentioned earlier, the shot of the Vision's sort of outline imprinted over top of the Grim Reaper. That's another cool little technique that he uses, just things like that. And he's actually pretty experimental when it comes to some of those storytelling devices. So that's why I think he is absolutely one of my favorite artists for sure.
I also like the panel of the Beast at the beginning where he's thinking back to his old X-Men chums, because you see him from like a worm's point of view, looking up at the Beast, and then the ceiling of the room, it's you get to see all the old X-Men,
right?
Black and white on the ceiling, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool.
All right, so yeah, thumbs up on the art. All right, Michael, so let's get into Jim Shooter. This is what we need to talk about.
Okay.
Jim Shooter. Born in Pittsburgh, PA.
Really?
Yeah, which is essentially my hometown. I live about 35 minutes south. So born in Pittsburgh, PA in 1951. As a 12-year-old, Shooter knew he wanted to write comics, and he liked Marvel books way better than DC. So what he did but he wanted to help DC. He was fond of DC's characters, but he thought Marvel was better at doing comic books. Uh-huh. So he spent a year, he dedicated himself for 1 year as a 12-year-old just to study Marvel's comics and to break down how they did it, what they did, and to learn how to write a comic book. So then, Michael, at the ripe old age of 13...
Yes, this is true.
He submitted some stories to DC for the Legion of Superheroes, who I believe we talked about last week, right? Or 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yes.
With the X-Men and Dave Cockrum and the Legion of Superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
So he sent these stories to DC, and they loved them, and they wanted to buy them, and they gave him some more jobs, and they said, hey, why don't you come up to New York to the offices? We'd like to meet you. And he says, I don't think I can do that. And they're like, wait, how old are you? And you're like, I'm 13. So they talked to his mom. They got his mom on the phone. And I guess they arranged when he was for his mom to take him up to New York to visit the offices once school was not in session, when he didn't have to go to school. And by the time he was 14, Mike Al, he was working regularly for DC Comics.
This is true. Now,
which is absurd.
Either this doesn't say much for DC, or Jim Shooter is a genius writer.
I will say this. I think Jim Shooter is a comic book genius.
Really?
Yeah. Now, not necessarily a genius writer.
Okay.
But a genius just in the field of comics. You look at his career, you look at what he did, you look at the impact he had on the field. This is the evidence of a genius.
I'll just say this. I'm not sure if he's a genius, but he's certainly a prodigy. The fact that he could write that well when he was 13. And what he did for Marvel, I mean, it's arguable that his era as editor-in-chief of Marvel was people,
don't hedge it, Mike. I think it was the greatest era of Marvel Comics, 78 to 87.
That's the thing is, you could, I think that the 60s by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, they obviously created all the characters.
Yeah.
But I think that this period when Jim Shooter was in charge, these are the comics that you and I can go back and reread over and over again and still get enjoyment out of. So there's obviously something to do. It had something to do with his direction, right?
Absolutely. And let's go. I wrote a bunch of notes about this, but maybe, let's come back to it, because let's still talk about when he was a kid.
Okay.
Because it's crazy. I'm sorry, but we talked about Jerry Conway getting into the business at 16, and we thought that was ridiculous. And here's Jim Shooter, 13. He's getting into comic book biz.
And the thing is I've read, you know me, I'm a big Legion of Superheroes fan, okay? But I'll tell you right now, the reason I'm a fan is because of his scripts. I actually, I didn't realize it when I was younger, but I would come across these old, because, I first got into 60s Superman because of this Kurt Swan art, okay? And so I liked the art, and I had a couple issues, and I kind of would peruse them, but I remember sitting down and reading them when I was maybe 14 or 15 finally, and going, holy shit, these are good. And it's it's really hard to explain though. You'd have to read to see what I mean, because obviously the fact that he was writing them when they were that young, there's a certain, it's really hard to explain, but it fit with the style of the day, but it was that much better. There's a reason that he was hired when he was that young. He really was a good writer. And the fact that he studied Marvel Comics and tried to boil down what was good about them, it's like we said, he was clearly a prodigy. So,
Yeah, and we'll get into a little bit later. I want to talk about he had his own little structure of what makes a good comic book, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah, there's a specific point that I remember that I'll bring up too. But anyway.
So the reason why he wanted to start writing comics at such an early age is also he wanted to help his family out. His dad was a steel worker. He didn't get a lot of money. They were struggling financially. So he wanted to make money to help his parents. And so at 14, he started working regularly for DC, and he wrote for both Action Comics and Adventure Comics. Were those like anthologies, Michael? Is that what
Action Comics starred at the time, I think, Superman, and it had backups of Supergirl or maybe the Legion. And then Adventure Comics also starred Superman, but it would have backups of the Legion of Superheroes or Superboy or whatever. Yeah.
In 19... Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, that's it. No, I think actually at that point, Superboy was the star of Adventure. But anyway, same thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because he did end up writing Superboy a little bit later. But in 1967, at 16, Shooter teamed with Kurt Swan, who you mentioned earlier, to create Superman's Race with the Flash.
Which is that's the one that I read as a kid that made me, like, it just blew my mind. It was awesome. It was great. Yeah.
It was the first time in DC history that the Flash and Superman raced, right? Because it looked like, what happened, Mike? Superman won? Or?
No, it was actually a tie.
Oh, a tie.
In fact, I think what happened is in the story, they find out that the mob is betting on who they think is going to win. And so they end up agreeing to make it a tie just so no one will win any money. Isn't that cool?
I don't know if that's cool. Don't you think they should have the Flash win? Like, hits is one thing, speed. Let him have that.
Do you remember that skit on Saturday Night Live, the Death of Superman skit, when it was like Chris Farley was the Hulk, and they had someone else in there as Batman, and then they had Adam Sandler played the Flash, okay? And he shows up at Superman's funeral, and he's like, yeah, I'm the Flash, you know. All I can do is run fast. Superman can run as fast as me. He never said it, but he could. It's like, it's like.
Was that also was Sinbad the host that day?
That's when Sinbad was Black Lightning. That's
yes,
right.
I was going to say, wasn't he Black Lightning?
That. Yes.
All right. Because in the 70s, the original cast of Saturday Night Live, they also did a superhero spoof one time, and John Belushi was the Hulk.
That's right. Yeah. And I don't remember his name, but the black dude was Ant-Man.
Garrett Morris.
Yes, he was Ant-Man. And because of that, they featured him in the Ant-Man movie as like a cab driver, right?
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he was in there.
Yeah, I liked Garrett Morris. Baseball's been very, very good to me. Yeah. Chico Escuela. All right. So after graduating high school in 1969, Shooter quit DC, and he also turned down going to college at New York University, where he was accepted, to take a job with Marvel. But he was so broke, he had to live at the YMCA.
Really?
And he only lasted like 3 weeks before he had to quit, and he moved back home to Pittsburgh.
Really? So, that's sad.
So for the next few years, Shooter took jobs in advertising and some illustrative work, because he's also an artist, Michael. He draws as well.
That's true.
And but eventually, after a few years away, I guess he did an interview with a fanzine talking about Legion of the Superheroes, and that sparked the comic book love again. And he reached out to DC, and both DC and Marvel offered him jobs. But he chose to go to DC because they offered him the opportunities to write Superman and Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes.
So he came back for a second run.
Yes. And that lasted like maybe a year or so. And then he had disputes with the editors on Superman, and he quit. And then, he got a call from Marv Wolfman from Marvel. And in December of 1975, he joined Marvel as an assistant editor and a writer. And the writing credits he had back then were just basically the Avengers. And he started on the Avengers with issue 151. Then he did issue 156. Then he was the regular writer from 158 to 168, 170 to 177, 211 to 222. And plus he did some other sporadic issues in between. And then way in the future, he did issue 266. His only other regular writing gig really was Daredevil. He did issue 141, and then he did 144 to 151, and then 223. So other than that little 8-issue run there on Daredevil, the Avengers, that's pretty much all his writing credits. Because then, Michael, he did other single issues and stuff. But
sure.
In 1978, just 3 years after returning to Marvel, or actually a little over 2 probably, Shooter became the editor-in-chief.
Right.
And
And part of that, I think, is because there had been so many in a row, right?
yep.
That just came and went, and
Yep.
no one really wanted the job, right? So he got it.
And this was at the time when Stan Lee had moved to LA to oversee Marvel's animation, film, and TV projects. And hey, by the way, Stan Lee, banner work on that. Marvel had so many great films and TV projects these years in 1970.
I think I don't remember who it was. Someone had, like Steve Gerber or somebody, finally had the balls to say, Stan Lee is out there in LA trying to get these deals. Nothing ever came out of it.
Yeah.
He's terrible at his job. Like, think about all those years he was in LA. It was like 15 years. And like, what did he get? Like one cartoon out of it? You know what I mean? He didn't do anything.
I mean, let's be honest. He went to LA just to bang models, and I mean, come on, that's what he did. He's hanging out at the Playboy Mansion every day, probably. Mm-hmm. All right, so but that meant Shooter was in full charge of the New York offices.
Right.
He was the man. No going to Stan Lee above his head. It was Jim Shooter in New York, and that's what it was. And he took charge because Marvel at this time they were having everyone said it was a family, it was great work in there and all that stuff. But no one stuck to deadlines. No one seemed to care if they missed the deadline or whatever. But Shooter started cracking the whip, and he cleaned up their production process. He made sure people stuck to deadlines. He had pretty strict editorial control. He kind of demanded that people told these types of stories, and he would create with creators about what the characters and stories should be doing. But Michael, while the creators weren't always a fan of Shooters, it's like we said, it's tough to argue with the results.
I agree.
78 to 87, Marvel, that for me is the golden era when Jim Shooter was editor-in-chief. I don't even remember who took over after he left. I don't even remember.
It was Tom DeFalco.
He was okay. Because then Bob Harris came in, and I guess that was a lot of trouble. People had trouble with Bob Harris, right?
Well, I can just say this. I started reading comics around 85, 86. And even I could see a slight drop in quality from, 86 to 87. I always felt like, Spider-Man was better before 87. Daredevil was better before 87. Everything was. And then once DeFalco got replaced by Bob Harris, well, that's where everything turned to crap, right? Like in the 90s, just all unreadable. So there's clearly... the guy at the top clearly had an effect on the quality of the books. So I agree with you. Yeah, it was the best era for me as well.
And just some of the storylines we're talking about here with Shooter in charge, the Claremont and John Byrne run on the X-Men. You had the Dark Phoenix, Days of Future Past, all that stuff. Yeah. Frank Miller's Daredevil run was under Shooter. Right. Walt Simonson's Thor run was under Shooter. Also, Shooter wrote and created Secret Wars, which was a huge deal.
Not very well written, to be honest, but yeah, it was a huge
But the concept was spectacular. I haven't read it since I was a kid, so I can't really speak to how, but just the concept of it was amazing.
Sure.
So good. Yeah. Shooter was fired, though, in 1987. He was fired.
That's right.
Let go. And I guess too many creators crying about it. But here's a bit of about editorial control and how he dealt with creators. This week, Michael, on Amazon Prime, there's a documentary called Chris Claremont and the X-Men. Are you aware of this?
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I know about it.
I did watch it. It's pretty good. If you like the X-Men, check it out. But Jim Shooter gets interviewed in it a lot. And
really? Okay.
One of the disputes he had with Claremont at the time was the Dark Phoenix saga. The original ending was for the Shi'ar, that alien race, to cure to get the Dark Phoenix out of Jean Grey, to have her just go back to normal. And she was just going to return to the X-Men just like nothing happened. Just go back to...
She was going to lose her powers. Yeah, but she would survive. Yeah.
Yeah, no punishment. And Jim Shooter said, no, you can't do that. She has to be punished. Something has to go... You have to either put her in prison or something has to happen. So John Byrne and Claremont were kicking around ideas, and they said, so Claremont came in the next day and he says, we're going to kill her. But he didn't think Shooter would be okay with that.
Right. He kind of just blurted it out as sort of like kind of like calling his bluff. So Shooter says, great. And then so Claremont left, and Shooter said he got a phone call a couple of minutes later from John Byrne saying, what, are you nuts? We can't kill her. But I think it was great. It was great. And Shooter, they'd always said that Jean Grey's dead. She's not coming back. But then years later, Shooter brought her back for X Factor. Unfortunately, yes.
And then Chris Claremont was not happy about that.
No, he wasn't not at all. No.
Because like even like also in this documentary, Louise Simonson is there,
Yes.
and Nascenti is also there.
Oh, I gotta watch this. Great.
I love Ann Nascenti.
Me too.
So, but they were talking and they were saying when Claremont called Wheezy and he said, "There's talk that Shooter's bringing back Jean Grey," and she says, "Oh, he would never do that. He's a man of his word, and he told you that he's never going to bring her back." So and then like 5 minutes later, they find out, yeah, he's bringing her back.
Yeah. You know what? Apparently, she knew that. I think on the Friday of that week, she knew it was happening, but she didn't tell Chris Claremont until the weekend. Because she knew that if Claremont found out on Friday that he would flip out and probably quit and whatever else. So she waited until the weekend to tell him.
Now, all three of them, I don't know when these interviews were done. This documentary, there were two different versions. I think one came out in 2015 and then an extended version was just released maybe in 2018. But I don't know when these interviews were done. They were years ago. But all three of them, they admitted that Shooter was tough. But looking back, he wasn't that tough. Like he wasn't so hard that they couldn't work with him. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like just at that moment, it seemed, oh, this is so terrible, artists and writers. But looking back, they said he really wasn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
But Bob Harris, Claremont seemed to be much more sour about Bob Harris.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other story. But Bob Harris is the one that removed him from X-Men, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah, he wasn't happy about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Shooter, maybe at the time people thought he's a dictator, but what he was doing was best for business.
Right.
It was best for business. And so there you go. Now, after he left Marvel, Michael, in 1989, he launched Valiant Comics.
Yes. Which I love.
And he only lasted there about 3 years, and then they ousted him from Valiant.
Yeah, I know. There seems to be a recurring theme here, eh?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so remind the kids some of the Valiant titles. They were like Golden Key characters, right? They brought back.
Some of them were revivals of Gold Key characters like Magnus Robot Fighter, Solar Man of the Atom, and what was the other one?
Turok,
Dinosaur Hunter.
Yeah.
And then the other ones were original characters like Harbinger, Eternal Warrior, Bloodshot. And then just to make a long story short, the company went through a few different owners over the years. And then what happened was they split up the characters, and the Gold Key characters, kind of went back on their own. And then the Valiant characters got rebooted again. Oh, I don't even know when. Or sorry, the Gold Key characters got revived maybe in the late 2000s. And then the Valiant characters also got rebooted in the early 2010s, I think. And it was really successful. And then, of course, they got bought out again. And the quality of the comics went down. But now what's happened is I think they were bought out by like some Chinese investors. And so they're actually turning their characters into movies now. And the first one's coming out next year, Bloodshot.
Wow. I had no idea.
It's Vin Diesel. Yeah.
Oh, no.
I know, unfortunately.
So after he left Valiant Comics, he started a couple other comic book companies. One, I think, was it Defiant Comics?
Defiant Comics, yeah.
Then I think Boardwalk Comics.
Broadway Comics.
Broadway, yes. Broadway.
Yeah.
Boardwalk. Yeah. Broadway's definitely better than Boardwalk.
Yeah.
And then he was going to try another one, Daring Comics, but I don't think that ever worked out. So then he started going back and working a bit as a writer, an editorial consultant for companies. And in 2007, Michael, he returned to Legion of Superheroes.
Yes, he did. And I gave it a try, and it was terrible.
But more than 30 years after his original run on the book, he returned. So that's pretty cool. I don't know. But all right, so there you go. We already talked about his real writing credits of Marvel, Avengers, Daredevil. And then he did all Secret Wars, issues 1 through 12. And he did all Secret Wars 2 as well, issues 1 through 9.
That's right. That's right.
So there you go, Jim Shooter.
And I'll say his run on a Valiant, his writing is really good there. So if you get a chance, please read Harbinger, read Solar, and Magnus Robot Fighter. Those are all really good.
I never read any Valiant.
They're solid. If you like Bronze Age Marvel, I think you'll like Valiant Comics, the early stuff, because it's all by Marvel. Like it's by Bob Layton, Barry Windsor Smith, Jim Shooter, all these Marvel guys, so it's all good stuff, yeah. Because
at the time, like I got into Image because of McFarlane and Silvestri and those fellas, and I guess Liefeld. I don't know, but yeah, I never really bought Valiant.
Well, they were huge at the beginning, then they kind of tapered off, then they kind of just died out, and everyone forgot about them. And so I went and I have like almost every issue of those early runs, And then they did the reboot, and that was kind of cool. But no one really, unfortunately, cares about the old ones except me. So
I heard good things about Harbinger, maybe just from you.
yeah, it might have been me. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was reading a list of top 10 books of the '90s, and then Harbinger was in there. I was like, really, Harbinger? So I picked up a trade paperback, and it was really good. It was basically like reading Claremont and Byrne X-Men. It was like that, you know?
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll give that a whirl. Try some Harbinger.
Sure. Yeah, I recommend it.
All right. So in 1982, Michael, Jim Shooter, he described what he looked for in a comic book story because he was editor-in-chief at the time. And he says, these are the things, he has 6 points that he looks for in a comic book story.
Okay.
Number 1, the characters must be introduced. You know, like you have to bring them all on stage, show the readers who the characters are. Now, it's interesting to compare this with the book we're reading, Avengers 160, because you clearly see that.
Yes.
Right at the front, you see all the Avengers. They're all there. You know who's involved. So he clearly does that. Number 2, their situation must be established. So what's the scene? What's going on? What's the conflict? What's going to be happening here? We know that they're in the mansion. We know that someone's there. Then number 3, the conflict must be introduced, and that's Grim Reaper showing up.
Yes, right away.
There's a conflict, and he gives them the what he's doing there. He's going to kill one of them. So number 4, suspense must be built, and that's what the trial does. Builds the suspense. Who's going to die, Wonder Man or Vision? We're building the suspense.
Point. Right.
Point 5, a climax must be reached, and that's where Vision steps up and says, hey, you know what? I am not your brother.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and kill me. And then Wonder Man saves him. There's your big climax. And then a resolution must be achieved. And that resolution, Wonder Man defeats his brother, and there it is. It's done. So there you go. His 6 points, and that issue follows those 6 points to the T. Exactly.
And it's a complete story, right?
Yep. There you go.
And you know what? I have to add to that, because Angel Senti said this, that another, I'm not sure if this fits into one of those 6, but he said that every story has to have a scene where a character thinks to himself or says to himself, essentially, I can't do this, but I must.
Ah, that's
and
hero.
So that's the conflict.
Hero.
Right. That's the conflict is like, and I know I look for that in comics, and I also look for it in movies, especially like shows like Buffy or like Sabrina the Teenage Witch that are like, you know, like sort of, I don't want to say teen shows, but it's like where they have the character where they're put in a situation where like, well, I can't do this, but I must, and I see it over and over again. So obviously he didn't invent that, you know, whatever trope, but it is a really good way to structure your story around that, you know? So
and that's what I mean about him being a comic book genius. He broke this down as a kid. He learned all this, and he shaped it in his own view. But I mean, he's just the guy, I think. He's one of the guys.
I agree. You know, it's funny. I was actually going to spring some Valiant comics on you, but they're technically out of our time range because we sort of end in 1989, right? So
yeah,
people have to expand that just for Valiant. But anyway.
We'll have to do a Valiant podcast.
There you go. Yeah.
Because you don't do enough podcasts every week.
Yeah, exactly. 3's not enough.
Hey, by the way, on a personal note, Michael, I met Jim Shooter.
Get out of town.
Yeah, when I was like a 12-year-old kid.
What?
Yeah, he was doing a comic book signing at a comic book store in Pittsburgh, which I didn't even know that was his hometown until just doing this research. I never knew he was from Pittsburgh. Okay. So the comic book store, I believe, it's called Ides, I believe, in Pittsburgh. It's famous. It's still there, I think. But yeah, my buddies and their dad, they took me down there, and I took some artwork, and because at the end I was drawing, but I was just drawing stuff out of comic books, and I was drawing like John Romita stuff, and I remember I took a picture of a panel of Wolverine from X-Men 193, where he's just looking at the camera and he's got his claws up in front of him, and I was just showing him some of my artwork, and Shooter said, "Hey, this is good stuff, but now you need to start doing your own stuff now. Start drawing your own stuff." Don't just, you're good at drawing other people's stuff. Draw your own, start working on your own stuff. And he signed the picture of the Wolverine I drew, and he signed it. Nice work, ! Jim Shooter.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. How about that?
So he holds a special place in your heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And just in that brief meeting, like he was real nice and kind to even, cause my friend's dad says, "Hey, can he show you some art?" And he says, "Sure." Cause he was busy. There's people all around him. But he was just very, how should I say it? Professional talking to me.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he wasn't placating me as a kid. He was
Sure.
talking to me like a peer. And
Interesting.
I think looking back on it, it's probably because he started when he was 12. You know what I mean?
Yes, good
So
point.
he didn't just dismiss me as a kid. He treated me like someone who could actually do this one day. And he said, "Hey, good work. You know, do this." So I really appreciate that, and I liked meeting him. And I think what I'm saying, Mike, is we should get him on the show. Let's get him on the show.
You
And,
actually think we could?
yeah, because we have that connection. You know, I'm sure he remembers me.
Well, listen, you know what's funny? I didn't meet him, but I saw him at a comic convention, and I frickin' went to his Q&A, but I was late, so I had to squeeze into the back of the room, and usually when I go to these conventions, I will take my audio recorder and put it right on the table that they're sitting, so
Yeah.
I can get perfect audio. But this time I had to record it from the back of the room, and you can't really hear him, but he was going over all this stuff, like his formula for writing good stories, and I tried to get as much of it as possible. Maybe I've never uploaded it. Maybe I will, just so we can listen to it.
Yeah, go check that tape.
Yeah, it was great though. It was great seeing him.
So there you go, Jim Shooter. All right, Mike. Overall, you didn't seem too enthused about this issue when we started, but now that we've discussed all this, did it change your view of this issue at all?
Yes, well, because I've always liked Jim Shooter, so yes, our conversation has made me appreciate it, especially for all the,
structure.
Right,
structure
for the
of the story.
I guess I could say the premise is ridiculous, but the execution of the premise is good. Put it that way.
Yeah, there's definitely some convoluted stuff here with the bracelets and the tag. Like I said, he just had to come up with an idea. How can I get to the mock trial? So here we go. And I won't explain it. But once you buy into that, it's fine. I think it's good. Solid.
That's true. That's true.
And now it is a little wordy in terms of backstory because they're rehashing all their backgrounds and stuff. But again, if you're not familiar with it, it's interesting stuff. I guess to read all that to understand Wonder Man and Vision and all that stuff. The dialogue is questionable at times. That's definitely.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can accept that, but yeah, it is pretty rough sometimes.
There's definitely some hokey dialogue and a lot of exposition and stuff. But again, the structure of the story is top notch. It's well done. George Perez's art is strong. I don't know. I was going to give it a 7, but I don't know. There's some good fight. I'll go 7. That seems natural.
7 for story and art?
Yeah, I think overall for the whole issue is 7.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give it a 7. I mean, I do love the art, but even the art, like we said, it's not peak Perez yet.
Yes.
So yeah, I'll give it a 7 for sure.
Yeah, because the dialogue's a little weak, but yeah, again, it's Shooter doing comic book genius stuff, so I'm all right with it.
and this is, let's be clear, in the whole Avengers history, this is one of the better eras, right? Shooter and Perez, like this whole stretch is great. So
yeah, I never really read too much of this. I know from our previous issue, what were we talking? Oh, that Thor annual we did, and we talked about Korvac. And
right.
I believe Shooter's big thing with the Avengers was the Korvac saga.
And I'm currently reading that.
Oh,
yes.
There you go.
Yeah. So it is really good. So
maybe I'll have to give that a whirl as well.
Yeah, I think you should.
So, all right, there you go. Avengers 160, Perez, Shooter, good stuff. Mike L., I'm almost dreading this.
Oh, why? You shouldn't be. So
you're up next week. It's one of your picks.
You had mentioned that this character had not been covered on our show yet, but I think you spoke too soon because it's been on my radar. Any guesses what character we're going to do next week?
Is this a Marvel character?
DC.
Son of a bitch. Well, we never had a straight Batman story, but we did have that Brave and the Bold.
But next week, we're going to do Batman number 295, drawn by my favorite 70s artist, Michael Golden, and written by Jerry Conway himself.
Okay, I'm not familiar with Michael Golden.
Really? Are you serious?
Did he ever do Marvel stuff, or did he just DC?
Yes, he did. He did a few G.I. Joe covers. He did the first. He did the first 12 issues of the Nam. He did.
Oh, I remember that book. Yeah, like a Vietnam comic book.
Exactly. He also.
What wouldn't it be better than a comic book about a grisly war?
Yeah. He also did the first 12 issues of Micronauts.
Okay, this is pretty understandable why I am not familiar with him because this all sounds terrible.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Trust me.
Well, I'm excited. I always like to experience new artists, so this will be good.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
But wasn't there another guy? Was there another artist with a gold in his name, or I don't know.
Honestly, I don't think so. There is like a Comic-Con organizer named Mike Gold, but no, as far as comic book artists, it's Michael Golden.
And who am I thinking of?
I don't know. But he
maybe Mike Zeck and John Bolton. I'm combining.
Yeah, that could be it. No, but Michael Golden, like, he's not terribly well known nowadays, but he's kind of most famous because basically Todd McFarlane kind of just ripped off him and Art Adams and just created his own style. But like the spaghetti webbing comes from Michael Golden. Like,
really?
Yeah, like if you look at Michael Golden's art, it's pretty clear that from him you just get straight to Art Adams and then to Todd McFarlane. But you can form your own opinion.
Hey, you mentioned a name there, Art Adams.
Yes, you a fan?
When I was a kid, I loved Art Adams.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too.
He was probably my favorite artist when I was like 12 years old.
Yeah, understandable. Like I finally got a chance to read his long shot book.
Oh yeah,
and
Nascenti.
Yes, and Nascenti. And when I read Longshot, I'm like, oh, well, this is Todd McFarlane. Like all the things that I thought McFarlane had innovated all came from here. Like the panel layouts and the way he draws muscles and the texture, everything. So yeah, we'll have to cover some Art Adams soon.
Yeah, I did a lot of good X-Men stuff. So a lot of annuals. He was always doing annuals, it seemed. Mm-hmm. He would step in and do the annual for him. All right. So what is that issue again? Batman 295?
Yep, 295, and it's
what year is that?
That is 78, I think. Let me see here. Doesn't say the year here, but it's definitely late 70s. So
all right, well that's good. I like the 70s. So
you got it. It's a good era.
All right, Michael.
All right, so that wraps it up until next Tuesday night. This has been Flea Market Fantasy with Mike Dell and Mike L. Del Radio.
Yep.
And as usual, a different Bronze Age comic every week. Next week is Batman. Who knows what it'll be after that? But you're always guaranteed a good time, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So thank you again for listening. Please leave comments in YouTube or Facebook, or email us at mail@comicbooksyndicate.com and let us know what you think of the comics. Let us know what you think of the reviews, and let us know maybe you guys could pick some comics for us to review. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So signing off. This is Mike L. And
Mike Dell.
All right. See you next time.